Hey there, welcome back. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Before we slip into the shadows, like and subscribe to uncover more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where are you listening from and what time is it there. It really brings our community together. Now, dim the lights for that cozy vibe and stick around till the end. Let's dive into the unknown. I pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Desert Rose Motel 15 minutes before my shift started, watching the setting sun paint the cracked asphalt in shades of orange and red. The motel sat like a forgotten relic on a forgotten stretch of Route 66, miles from anything resembling civilization. 32 rooms arranged in a horseshoe shape around a parking lot that could hold maybe 40 cars on a good night. We rarely had more than 5. The pay was what kept me here. $18 an hour to work the front desk at a roadside motel seemed absurd when most places paid minimum wage. But my father's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and my mother's care facility charged more per month than I'd made in a year at my previous job. The Desert Rose offered me a lifeline, and I wasn't about to question the exceptional compensation. A silver Honda Civic pulled in beside my truck. Sophia Martinez stepped out, adjusting her uniform shirt and running a hand through her dark hair. She looked nervous, which made sense. First night on the job always brought nerves. "Evening," I said, as we both walked toward the front office. "Ready for your first shift?" Sophia nodded, clutching a coffee cup like it might steady her hands. "As ready as I'll ever be. Thomas said you'd show me the ropes." Thomas Henderson was our manager, a man who'd been running the Desert Rose for longer than I'd been alive. He rarely worked nights anymore, preferring to handle administrative duties during daylight hours. That left the overnight shifts to people like me, who needed the money badly enough to accept the strange conditions. "I'll walk you through everything," I assured her, unlocking the office door. "It's not complicated, but there are specific procedures we need to follow." The office was small and cluttered with outdated furniture that probably dated back to the motel's construction in the 1950s. A worn wooden desk dominated the space, covered in papers, an ancient computer monitor, and a large leather-bound ledger that looked like it belonged in a museum. Behind the desk, a pegboard held room keys. Actual metal keys, not the plastic cards most modern hotels used. Sophia set her coffee down and looked around with barely concealed skepticism. "Is that computer from the 90s? 1998, actually," I said, logging into the reservation system. "It works fine for what we need. Most of our bookings still come through phone calls anyway." What I didn't mention was that the computer was mostly for show. The real record-keeping happened in the leather ledger, and that was where things got complicated. "Before we get into the booking system, I need to explain the rules," I said, watching Sophia's expression carefully. "These aren't suggestions, they're requirements, and breaking them has consequences." Sophia's nervous smile faded slightly. "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that ended the last receptionist's employment very suddenly," I said. "Rule 1. Every guest must present valid identification. You check their ID against the name in the ledger before distributing keys. No exceptions." "That seems pretty standard," Sophia said, relaxing a bit. "Most hotels do that." "Rule 2, I continued. The ledger entries must be checked before and after every check-in. If a name appears in the ledger that doesn't match your reservation list, you do not give them a room." Sophia frowned, looking at the massive leather book. "What do you mean, appears in the ledger? Don't we write the names?" "We do," I said carefully. "But sometimes names appear that we didn't write. When that happens, those people don't get rooms." "That doesn't make sense. How would—" "Rule 3, I interrupted, not wanting to get bogged down in explanations I didn't fully understand myself. After 3:08 a.m., Any room with unclaimed luggage visible through the window gets locked and marked unavailable. You place a red tag on that room's key and do not rent it until Thomas gives clearance. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see the doubt creeping into her expression, the same skepticism I'd felt when Thomas had trained me 3 years ago. Rule 4. If a guest's face appears blurred or distorted in any reflective surface, mirrors, windows, phone screens, you politely inform them we're fully booked and send them elsewhere. "This is a joke, right?" Sophia finally said. "Thomas is testing me or something?" I shook my head. I wish it were a joke. Rule 5. Between midnight and 4 a.m., if you hear knocking from rooms you know are empty, document it in this notebook. I tapped a spiral-bound notebook beside the ledger. Write down the room number, time, and pattern of knocks. Don't investigate. Don't open those rooms. Sophia took a step back from the desk. "What kind of place is this?" "A place that pays $18 an hour," I said simply, "and a place where people who follow the rules stay safe." "Safe from what?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I opened the ledger to show her the entries. The handwriting varied. Mine, Thomas's, the receptionist before me. But scattered among the normal entries were other names written in a script so precise it looked mechanical. Those names had dates beside them that didn't match our reservation system. "See these?" I pointed to 3 such entries. Marcus Klein, November 3rd, Diane Foster, November 7th, Robert Chang, November 15th. None of those people made reservations through our system, but their names appeared in the ledger anyway. "And what happened when they showed up?" Sophia asked quietly. Marcus Klein showed up exactly on November 3rd at 11:47 p.m. The receptionist that night, a guy named Peter, checked him in despite the name appearing mysteriously. Marcus went to his room. At 2:14 a.m., housekeeping found Peter unconscious at the desk with no memory of the previous 3 hours. The security footage from that period was corrupted beyond recovery. Sophia's face had gone pale. "And Marcus Klein?" "Checked out at 6 a.m. according to the ledger entry, but nobody saw him leave. The room he'd been given showed no signs of occupancy. The bed was still made, towels unused, no personal items. Like he was never there." "That could be explained. Diane Foster," I continued, "showed up November 7th. Different receptionist, a woman named Linda, didn't believe in the rules. She checked Diane in. Linda quit the next morning, drove straight home, and according to Thomas, she won't talk about what happened that night. She sends us her resignation letter via certified mail and never came back for her final paycheck." Sophia wrapped her arms around herself despite the office's stuffy warmth. "And Robert Chang?" "Never showed up. His name appeared in the ledger, but he didn't arrive. Sometimes they don't come. We don't know why." I flipped through more pages, showing her the pattern that had emerged over years. Names appearing in that mechanical script, always at night, always without corresponding reservations. Guest arrivals that followed, sometimes with devastating consequences for staff who didn't follow protocol. "Thomas has been running this place for 30 years, I said. "He's documented everything. There's a filing cabinet in his office full of incident reports, police statements, insurance claims. This isn't superstition, Sophia, it's survival." She looked at me for a long moment, then at the ledger, then back at me. "Why do you stay?" "My father has stage 4 cancer. Experimental treatments that insurance won't cover cost $8,000 per month. My mother's Alzheimer's facility is another $4,500. My sister's in college. I'm all they have. That doesn't... $18 an hour, I repeated. Plus hazard pay bonuses that Thomas gives when things get particularly strange. I clear close to $50,000 a year working nights at a roadside motel. Show me another job that pays that without a degree." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "What about your life? Relationships, friends, normal stuff?" I thought about my empty apartment, about the dates I'd canceled because of overnight shifts, about the friends who'd stopped calling when I couldn't make their daytime events. Sometimes survival means sacrifice. The clock on the wall read 8:47 p.m. Our shift officially started at 9:00 p.m. and ran until 7:00 a.m. 10 hours of manning the desk, checking in late arrivals, handling whatever came through that door. "I need you to decide now," I said. "If you're not comfortable with this, there's no shame in walking away. But if you stay, you follow every rule exactly as I've explained." Sophia looked at the coffee cup she'd set down, at the ancient computer, at the leather ledger with its mysterious entries. "The pay is really $18 an hour. Thomas will start you at 17 during training. After 2 weeks, if you're still here, it goes to 18. And if I follow the rules, I'll be safe." "Nobody who's followed the rules has been seriously harmed," I said carefully. "There have been scares, sure, unsettling experiences, but physical harm, that only comes from breaking protocol." Sophia took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll try." I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief because training someone new was tedious, and having Sophia quit immediately would mean doing it all over again with the next hire. Guilt because I was essentially introducing her to a world of carefully managed horror in exchange for decent wages. "Let's start with the basics," I said, gesturing for her to join me behind the desk. "This is the reservation system. When someone calls to book, you enter their information here. Name, phone number, dates of stay, room preference if they have one. The system assigns a room number automatically." I walked her through several practice bookings, watching as she navigated the clunky interface. She picked it up quickly, her fingers moving with the confidence of someone who'd worked customer service before. "After you enter the reservation in the computer, you write it in the ledger." I opened to today's date, name, arrival date, room number. "Your handwriting, your responsibility." Sophia took the pen I offered and practiced a few entries on a spare sheet of paper. Her writing was neat and clear, nothing like the mechanical script of those other entries. When someone arrives to check in, you have them present ID. You verify the name matches both the computer reservation and the ledger entry. Then you assign the key. I pulled room 12's key from the pegboard. These are old-fashioned, I know. Thomas refuses to modernize. Says the metal keys have history and history matters here. What does that mean? I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. But I've learned not to question the things that keep us safe. I showed her how to log a guest's arrival, how to calculate payment if they hadn't prepaid online, how to work the credit card machine that was only slightly younger than the computer. "What if someone doesn't have a reservation?" Sophia asked. "Walk-ins are common on Route 66. Lots of road trippers who don't plan ahead. You check for available rooms in the system, verify against the ledger that no mysterious names have appeared for that room, then process them like any other guest. ID check is mandatory for walk-ins, even more so than reservations." As I explained, the office phone rang. I answered with the practiced greeting. "Desert Rose Motel, how can I help you?" An elderly man's voice crackled through the line. "Need a room for tonight. My wife and I are driving cross-country and we're about 40 miles from your location." "Certainly, sir. May I have your name?" "Gerald Price. That's Price. I entered his information into the system while Sophia watched. "I have you down for 1 queen bed, checking in tonight and departing tomorrow morning. Will that work?" "Perfect. We'll be there in about an hour." After confirming his credit card information and providing directions, I hung up and wrote Gerald Price's name in the ledger. My handwriting, normal and clear. See, standard booking. When he arrives, we check his ID, verify he matches the reservation, and give him his key. Sophia nodded, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She kept glancing at the ledger as if expecting names to spontaneously appear. For the next hour, I showed her the rest of the office, where we kept extra supplies, how to work the industrial coffee maker that guests could access 24 hours a day, where the first aid kit was stored. I explained the security camera system, though I cautioned that the footage had a history of corruption during unusual incidents. There's a panic button under the desk. I pointed to a red button mounted on the underside of the desktop. That alerts Thomas directly. His house is only 5 miles away. He can be here in 10 minutes. Has anyone ever used it? Twice in my 3 years. Once when a guest became violently intoxicated and threatening. Once when I hesitated. When what? When I couldn't tell if the person at the desk was actually the guest who'd checked in 3 hours earlier. Something about them was wrong. Different. The panic button brought Thomas, who handled the situation. What did he do? I don't know. He sent me home early that night and dealt with it himself. The next day, he just said the matter was resolved and never to discuss it again. At 9:51 p.m., headlights swept across the office windows. An older couple emerged from a well-maintained Toyota, moving with the stiff slowness of people who'd been driving too long. That'll be the Prices, I said. Watch how I handle the check-in, then you'll do the next one. Gerald Price had the weathered look of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. His wife, Martha, smiled warmly as they approached the desk. "Evening, folks," I greeted them. "Gerald Price, party of 2? "That's us," Gerald confirmed, already reaching for his wallet. "May I see your driver's license, Mr. Price?" He handed it over without hesitation. I checked the name and photo carefully, then glanced at Martha. "And yours as well, Mrs. Price, if you don't mind." She provided her ID, which matched her husband's last name. I verified both against the reservation and ledger entry, confirming everything aligned perfectly. "You're in room 12, I said, handing Gerald the key. "Around the bend to your left, third door down. Checkout is at 11 a.m., but if you need a later checkout, just let us know. Continental breakfast starts at 6 a.m. in the lobby." "Much obliged," Gerald said, taking the key. The couple headed back to their car to get their luggage. I turned to Sophia. "See? Straightforward process. Check ID, verify against ledger, distribute key. The problems only arise when steps get skipped." What if their IDs had shown different names? Then I politely explain there's been a reservation error and we can't accommodate them. I offer to call other motels in the area and help them find alternative lodging. That's it? Just send them away. That's it. Better to lose a booking than to ignore a warning sign. Sophia processed this, her expression thoughtful. And the blurred face thing? How do you even check for that? You pay attention. When someone approaches the desk, watch their reflection in the glass doors behind you, or in your phone screen if you happen to have it out. Most of the time, reflections are normal, but sometimes I trailed off. Sometimes the person standing in front of you has a clear, normal face, but their reflection is wrong. Blurred, distorted, or showing features that don't match. When that happens, you know something isn't right. How often has that happened? 3 times in my 3 years. Each time, I followed protocol, sent them elsewhere. I don't know what would have happened if I'd given them a room, and I don't want to find out. The next few hours passed quietly. Sophia practiced navigating the computer system, familiarizing herself with the office layout, asking questions about various procedures. Around midnight, she took her first solo phone reservation while I supervised. She handled it well, voice professional and friendly. Information recorded accurately in both the system and ledger. When she hung up, I could see the small spark of confidence in her expression. "Good job," I said genuinely. "You're picking this up quickly." "It's not that different from other front desk work," she said. "Except for the creepy rules part." "The rules aren't creepy, they're protective." "Semantics," Sophia muttered, but there was a slight smile on her face. At 12:47 a.m., a truck pulled into the parking lot. Not the careful parking of exhausted travelers, but the aggressive jerking of someone who'd been drinking. Two men in their 30s stumbled out, laughing loudly and disrupting the desert quiet. I felt my stomach tighten. Drunk guests were always unpredictable, and adding them to an already strange environment created concerning possibilities. "Watch this carefully," I told Sophia quietly as the men approached the office. They burst through the door with the exaggerated enthusiasm of intoxication, bringing the smell of beer and cigarette smoke with them. "Hey there," the taller one slurred. "Got any rooms available?" "Yes, sir, we do," I said, maintaining professional courtesy. "May I see your identification?" He fumbled with his wallet, dropping several cards on the floor before finally extracting his driver's license. "Here you go." I took it carefully, checking the name. Brandon Parker. The photo showed a cleaner, more sober version of the man before me. "And your friend?" I asked, looking at the second man. "Don't need his ID," Brandon said dismissively. "I'm paying." "I'm afraid I need identification from all occupants, motel policy." The second man, clearly the more intoxicated of the two, leaned heavily on the desk. "That's stupid. He's paying. What's it matter?" "Insurance requirements," I said smoothly, a practiced lie. "Everyone staying in the room must be registered." Grumbling, the second man produced his license. Tyler Hudson. I verified both against the system, then opened the ledger. My blood went cold. There, written in that precise mechanical script, was a name I hadn't noticed before. Brandon Parker. Room 7. Today's date. I looked up at the man before me, then back at the ledger. The entry hadn't been there when I'd shown Sophia how to make her practice booking. This was new, fresh, impossible. "Problem?" Brandon asked, his intoxication making him more aggressive. I thought quickly, weighing options. The rule was clear. If a name appeared in the ledger that didn't match a reservation I'd made, don't give them a room. But Brandon Parker had legitimately shown up without a reservation. His name in the ledger could be coincidence. Except I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Not here. "I apologize, gentlemen, but we're actually fully booked for tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "Let me check what other accommodations might be available in the area." "Fully booked?" Tyler scoffed. "The parking lot's empty." "We have several reservations checking in throughout the night," I lied. "I truly apologize for the inconvenience." Brandon's expression darkened. "This is bullshit. We've been driving for 6 hours." "I understand your frustration," I said, already pulling up a list of nearby motels. "There's a Best Western about 30 miles east." 30 miles? You want us to drive another 30 miles? "Or the Sunset Lodge, which is 40 miles west," I continued calmly. "Both should have availability." "Forget this," Tyler said, pulling Brandon toward the door. "Place looks like a dump anyway." They left in a wave of profanity and aggressive door slamming. I watched their truck peel out of the parking lot with a sense of relief so profound my hands shook. Sophia stared at me. "The parking lot is empty. We have 28 vacant rooms." "Look at the ledger," I said, pointing to Brandon Parker's name. "That entry wasn't there before." She leaned over, examining the mechanical script. "But how? We were here the whole time. Nobody wrote that." "That's why we follow the rules," I said. "I don't understand how names appear. I just know that when they do, those people don't get rooms." Sophia touched the entry, her finger tracing the precise letters. "What would have happened if you'd given him a key?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe something worse than Linda experienced. The point is, we'll never find out because we followed protocol." She nodded slowly, the skepticism I'd seen earlier replaced by something closer to belief. Sometimes seeing is believing, but sometimes survival means believing before you see. The rest of the night proceeded without major incident. A few legitimate check-ins, all of whom had normal IDs, matching reservations and reflections that showed their actual faces. Sophia handled 2 check-ins under my supervision, her hands still shaking slightly but her voice remaining professional. At 3:15 a.m., I stood and stretched, my back cracking after hours in the uncomfortable desk chair. "Time for the luggage check." "The unclaimed bags rule?" Sophia asked. "Every room, every night after 3 a.m., I confirmed. "Bring the flashlight." We walked the horseshoe shape of the motel, checking each window for any signs of luggage left in supposedly vacant rooms. The first 23 rooms were clear, empty, dark, showing no signs of occupancy. Room 24 was different. Through the window, barely visible in the dim light of my flashlight, sat a brown leather suitcase. Old-fashioned, the kind with actual buckles instead of zippers. It sat in the center of the floor, perfectly positioned as if someone had placed it there deliberately. "Is that room occupied?" Sophia whispered, despite no one being around to hear us. I checked my phone, pulling up the reservation system. "Room 24 is vacant. Has been for 3 nights. "Then whose suitcase is it?" "I don't know, and we're not going to find out." I pulled a red tag from my pocket and handed it to Sophia. "When we get back to the office, you'll tag this room's key and mark it unavailable in the system." We continued our circuit. Room 28 also had something wrong, though it took me a moment to process what I was seeing. A neat row of shoes lined up inside the door. 4 pairs, each positioned with precision. The room was listed as vacant. "Tag 28 as well," I told Sophia. "Should we report this to Thomas?" "In the morning. There's nothing he can do right now, and calling him at 3 a.m. for something we've already handled according to protocol would just disturb his sleep." Back in the office, Sophia placed red tags on both keys. "How long do they stay unavailable?" "Until Thomas clears them. Usually, he'll check the rooms during daylight hours, document whatever's there, remove it if possible. Sometimes the items disappear on their own. Sometimes they remain, and the room stays unavailable for days or weeks. That doesn't hurt your business? Having rooms you can't rent? Thomas says the cost of keeping those rooms empty is cheaper than the consequences of renting them with whatever occupies them." Sophia sat down heavily, and the long night catching up with her. "This is insane. Everything about this place is insane." "Yet here we are," I said, "getting paid $18 an hour to sit in an office and follow simple rules." "Nothing about this is simple. The rules are simple. The reasons behind them might be complex, but following them, that's straightforward." At 4:12 a.m., it started, the knocking. Room 17 first. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the desert silence. I grabbed the spiral notebook and documented. Room 17, 4:12 a.m., 3 knocks. Sophia had gone rigid, her eyes wide. What do we do? Nothing. We document and ignore. The knocking moved to room 9. 5 knocks this time, faster, more insistent. I wrote it down, then room 14. 7 knocks. A pattern was emerging, though I couldn't determine what it meant. Why are they knocking? Sophia whispered. I don't know. Maybe they want to be acknowledged. Maybe they're testing to see if we'll investigate. The point is, we don't respond. The knocking continued for 23 minutes, moving from room to room in no particular pattern I could discern. Sometimes 3 knocks, sometimes 5, sometimes 7 or 9. Always odd numbers. I documented each occurrence while Sophia sat frozen at the desk. Then, as suddenly as it began, the knocking stopped. The desert quiet returned, broken only by the hum of the office air conditioning unit. Does that happen every night? Sophia asked, her voice hoarse. Not every night, maybe twice a week on average. Sometimes more frequently, sometimes we'll go weeks without any knocks. And you just document it? Don't try to figure out what's causing it? Thomas has theories. He thinks the motel sits on something unusual, some kind of weak point or convergence. But theories don't change our job. We document, we follow rules, we stay safe. The clock crawled toward 7 a.m. Sophia had gone quiet, processing the night's events. I could see her mental struggle, the part that wanted to dismiss everything as elaborate pranks or coincidence, warring with the part that had witnessed things without rational explanation. At 6:47 a.m., Gerald Price returned his key, he and Martha looking rested despite the early hour. Lovely place, Martha commented. Best sleep we've had in days. Glad to hear it, I said genuinely. Safe travels. After they left, Sophia turned to me. They had a normal night. Nothing strange happened to them. Because they were legitimate guests with proper reservations and matching IDs. The strangeness doesn't touch people who belong here. And how do you define who belongs? I don't. The ledger does. At 6:58 a.m., Thomas Henderson arrived, looking surprisingly alert for the early hour. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. How was the night? He asked, his gaze moving between Sophia and me. 2 rooms need clearing, I said, handing him the documentation. Unclaimed luggage in 24, shoes in 28. Multiple knocking incidents between 4:12 and 4:35 a.m., all documented in the notebook. 1 walk-in turned away after their name appeared in the ledger without a reservation. Thomas nodded, scanning my notes. And Miss Martinez? How are you handling your first night? Sophia looked at him directly. This place is impossible. Yet here you are, Thomas said, a slight smile touching his lips. Still employed, still safe. That's what matters. Is any of this even legal? Can you run a business with rules that make no sense? The rules make perfect sense when you understand what we're dealing with, Thomas replied. As for legality, we follow all state and federal regulations regarding lodging establishments. The additional protocols are internal policies, not illegal. But they're effective, Thomas interrupted gently. Miss Martinez, I appreciate your skepticism. It shows you think critically. But I've run this establishment for 3 decades. These rules were passed down to me by the previous owner, who ran it for 40 years before that. Some knowledge transcends rational explanation. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it again. What argument could she make against decades of proven results? Get some sleep, Thomas said to both of us. I'll handle the day shift. Miss Martinez, I'll see you back here at 9 p.m. tonight. In the parking lot, Sophia paused by her car. How do you do it? Come back night after night knowing what happens here? I thought about my father's latest medical bills, about my mother's care facility calling to discuss payment options, about my sister's tuition due date. Sometimes survival means accepting things we don't fully understand. The money's good, the rules keep us safe, and my family needs me. Sophia nodded slowly. I'll see you tonight. I watched her drive away, wondering if she'd actually return. About 30% of new hires didn't come back after their first night. The money wasn't enough to overcome the psychological weight of what we dealt with. My apartment was small and dark, the curtains drawn against the morning sun. I'd learned to sleep during daylight, though it never felt natural. As I lay in bed, I thought about Brandon Parker's name appearing in the ledger, about the knocking rooms, about Sophia's shaken expression. This job took pieces of your soul slowly, trading them for decent wages and the satisfaction of keeping something contained. I didn't fully understand what we were containing. I just knew that the alternative, walking away, letting someone without training or understanding take over, felt wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Dad's latest scan came back. More appointments next week. Thank you for everything you do. I closed my eyes, her gratitude settling over me like a weight and a comfort simultaneously. This was why I stayed. This was worth the strange rules and midnight knockings and names that appeared in impossible ways. I slept fitfully, dreaming of mechanical handwriting and faces that blurred in reflections, waking periodically to check my phone's clock and calculate how many hours remained before my next shift began. Evening came too quickly. I arrived at the Desert Rose at 8:45 p.m., surprised to see Sophia's Honda already in the lot. She sat in her car, engine running, clearly debating something. When I tapped on her window, she jumped, then rolled it down. Wasn't sure you'd come back, I said honestly. I wasn't either, she admitted. But I need this job, and if the rules really do keep us safe, then maybe it's manageable. That's the right attitude. We walked into the office together, finding Thomas at the desk reviewing paperwork. Miss Martinez, he greeted her warmly. Glad to see you returned. That shows character. Shows I need to pay rent, Sophia muttered, but there was no real bitterness in her tone. I cleared rooms 24 and 28, Thomas said, addressing me. The items were removed and disposed of properly. Both rooms are back in circulation. Any idea where they came from? None whatsoever, as always. He stood, gathering his belongings. Quiet night predicted. Current occupancy is 4 rooms, all legitimate reservations with confirmed check-ins earlier today. 2 more reservations expected between 10 p.m. and midnight. After Thomas left, Sophia and I settled into the rhythm of the shift. I let her handle more tasks tonight, stepping in only to supervise and correct minor errors. At 10:34 p.m., our first expected reservation arrived. A young couple on their honeymoon, faces bright with happiness and exhaustion. Sophia processed their check-in smoothly, verifying IDs and ledger entries without prompting from me. You're getting the hang of it, I told her after they left. It helps that they were normal, she said. No mysterious ledger entries, no blurred faces, just tired newlyweds. Most nights are mostly normal, I said. The strange things are relatively rare. It's just that when they happen, they're significant. How do you define significant? Things that make you question reality, things that violate your understanding of how the world works. Like names appearing in ledgers? Exactly like that. At 11:43 p.m., a minivan pulled up. A harried-looking woman in her 40s emerged, followed by 3 children ranging from perhaps 6 to 12 years old. They looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from a long day of travel. Please, let you have rooms, the woman said as she entered. "We've been driving since 6 a.m. and the kids are falling apart." "We have availability," Sophia assured her, already pulling up the reservation system. "Do you have a reservation, or is this a walk-in?" "Walk-in. Our original hotel canceled our reservation due to plumbing issues. You're the first place we've found with vacancies." Sophia glanced at me. This was the moment where careful attention mattered most. Walk-ins required extra vigilance. "May I see your driver's license?" Sophia asked. The woman provided it. Christine Alvarez. Sophia checked the computer system, verified availability, then consulted the ledger. I watched her face carefully, seeing the moment of relief when she found no mysterious entries for the available rooms. "I can put you in room 19, Sophia said. 2 double beds, that should work for your family." "Perfect," Christine said, already pulling out her credit card. As Sophia processed the payment, I casually observed Christine's reflection in the glass doors behind our desk. Clear, normal, matching her actual appearance. No distortions, no blurring. The transaction completed smoothly. Christine gathered her exhausted children and headed to their room. "Good job," I told Sophia. "You caught all the checkpoints naturally." "I was terrified something would be wrong," she admitted. "Kept expecting her name to be in the ledger or her face to blur." "That vigilance is good. It means you're taking this seriously." The next 3 hours passed quietly. Sophia practiced more bookings over the phone, becoming comfortable with the system. We handled one more walk-in around 2 a.m. A truck driver named Kevin Walsh who had all the right credentials and no red flags. At 3 a.m., we did our luggage check. All clear tonight. Every vacant room remained properly empty. "That's a relief," Sophia said as we returned to the office. "Last night's luggage was creepy." "You'll develop a sense for when things are going to be strange," I told her. "Some nights feel different from the moment you arrive." "Did last night feel different?" I considered the question. Yes, actually, there was a tension in the air, like something was building. "And tonight?" "Tonight feels calmer, which means we stay alert but don't borrow trouble." At 4:08 a.m., the knocking started again. Room 23. 4 knocks, sharp and insistent. Sophia grabbed the notebook without prompting, documenting the time and room number. I felt a surge of pride. She was adapting. The knocking moved to room 15, 6 knocks, then room 8, 8 knocks. The pattern was different tonight. Even numbers instead of odd. I noted this in the margin of the documentation. "Do the patterns mean anything?" Sophia asked. "Thomas has theories. He thinks different patterns indicate different entities or phenomena, but it's all speculation." Room 30, 2 knocks, barely audible. "That sounded different," Sophia observed. She was right. The previous knocks had been sharp and aggressive. These were tentative, almost hesitant. Room 30 knocked again. 2 knocks, softer this time. "Do we respond to different sounding knocks?" Sophia asked. "We don't respond to any knocks," I said firmly. "Doesn't matter how they sound." But room 30's knocking continued, maintaining that soft, almost plaintive quality. 2 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause. The rhythm was hypnotic. "It sounds sad," Sophia whispered. "It sounds like something trying to manipulate your emotions," I countered. "Stay objective." She nodded, but I could see the internal struggle. The knocks did sound sad, like someone genuinely seeking help rather than making aggressive demands. But that's exactly what made them dangerous. The things that prey on compassion are often more effective than those that inspire fear. After 15 minutes, the knocking from room 30 finally stopped. The silence felt loaded, expectant. "I hope they're okay," Sophia said quietly. "They aren't guests," I reminded her. "There's no one in that room who needs help." "How do you know?" "Because we'd have checked them in. Because their name would be in our system. Whatever makes those sounds isn't human in any way we understand." Sophia shuddered, but didn't argue. The remainder of the night passed without incident. When Thomas arrived at 6:58 a.m., Sophia and I both looked forward to leaving, despite the shift being relatively calm. "Knocking incidents in multiple rooms," I reported, handing over the documentation. "Different pattern than last night. Even numbers instead of odd." Thomas scanned the notes, his expression thoughtful. "Interesting. That hasn't happened in several months. What does it mean? I'm not entirely sure, but I'll review the historical records, see if there's any correlation." In the parking lot, Sophia paused again before getting in her car. "It's getting easier," she said. "Still strange, but I'm adjusting." "That's good. Most people who make it past the first week end up staying for years." "Is that encouraging or depressing?" "Depends on your perspective." She smiled tiredly. "See you tonight." I drove home, my mind already planning how to spend my day. Sleep, visit my father at the hospital, check on my mother at her facility, maybe squeeze in some grocery shopping. The normal routines that kept me grounded between supernatural overnight shifts. A week passed, then 2. Sophia settled into the role with increasing confidence. She handled check-ins smoothly, documented anomalies efficiently, and most importantly, followed the rules without deviation. On her 11th night, we experienced our first major incident with her present. The night started normally enough. Current occupancy at 5 rooms, 2 more reservations expected. Sophia and I split tasks comfortably, falling into a practiced routine. At 11:27 p.m., a car pulled up, a newer model sedan with out-of-state plates. A single occupant emerged, male, mid-30s, carrying a small overnight bag. He entered the office with a professional smile. "Evening, I'd like a room for 2 nights." "Certainly," Sophia said, taking the lead as had become her habit. "May I see your driver's license?" He provided it. Marcus Bellamy, Nevada license, photo matching his appearance. Sophia entered his information while I casually checked his reflection in the glass doors. Clear, normal, no distortions. She consulted the ledger, comparing available rooms against the entries. Her routine was smooth, practiced. Then she froze. I moved closer, looking over her shoulder at what had stopped her. There, in that mechanical script, was a name, Marcus Bellamy. Room 14, tonight's date. Sophia's training kicked in. Without missing a beat, she looked up with an apologetic smile. "I apologize, Mr. Bellamy, but it appears we're fully booked for tonight." His pleasant expression didn't change. "The parking lot seems quite empty." "We have several reservations checking in throughout the night," Sophia replied smoothly, using the practiced lie. "I can recommend some other establishments." "I don't want other establishments," Marcus interrupted, his voice remaining friendly but gaining an edge. "I want a room here." "I understand, sir, but we simply don't have availability." "Oh," Marcus leaned against the desk, his posture casual but his eyes intense. "I've been driving for 8 hours. I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I've specifically chosen to stay at this motel. Surely you can accommodate one more guest." Sophia looked at me. I could see the uncertainty in her expression, the doubt creeping in. We were clearly not fully booked. Turning him away felt arbitrary, cruel even. But the rule was absolute. "Sir," I stepped forward, "we apologize for the inconvenience. The Sunset Lodge 40 miles west should have availability. We'd be happy to call ahead and confirm." Marcus's attention shifted to me. and something about his gaze made my skin crawl. It was too focused, too intent, like a predator assessing prey. "What if I offered double your nightly rate?" he asked. "Would that create availability?" "Our rates aren't negotiable, and our occupancy status doesn't change based on payment," I said firmly. "We truly cannot accommodate you tonight." For a long moment, Marcus simply stared at me. Then his face changed. The pleasant expression slipped, revealing something underneath. Not quite anger, not quite anything I could name, just wrong. "You know," he said quietly, "don't you? You know why I'm here." Sophia inhaled sharply beside me. I kept my voice steady. "Sir, we've explained that we're fully booked. If you're not interested in alternative accommodations, I appear in your book," Marcus said, nodding toward the ledger. "My name is there, written in a hand that belongs to no one who works here. You've seen this before." My blood went cold. The things that appeared in the ledger had never acknowledged the ledger's existence. They'd never demonstrated awareness of the system. "I don't know what you're referring to," I said carefully. "Don't you?" His smile was wrong now, too wide, showing too many teeth. "This place has rules. Old rules passed down through decades, and you follow them religiously because you've seen what happens when people don't. I'm going to have to ask you to leave," I said, my hand moving subtly toward the panic button under the desk. "I'll leave," Marcus said amiably. "But I want you to understand something. Those rules? They're not protection, they're negotiation. Every name that appears in that ledger represents a bargain made long before you started working here. When you turn us away, you're not saving yourself. You're fulfilling your part of the agreement." "What agreement?" Sophia asked, her voice barely audible. "The motel stands on something old, a thin place where boundaries blur. Your founder, the man who built this place in 1952, he made a deal. Let certain things pass through without interference, in exchange for this place remaining profitable despite its isolation." "That's nonsense," I said, though doubt gnawed at me. "Is it?" Marcus tilted his head unnaturally far, the movement making Sophia gasp. "Then why does this motel survive when every other business along this stretch closed decades ago? Why do guests continue to find their way here despite minimal advertising? Why does the desert rose persist?" "Get out," I said, my finger poised over the panic button. Marcus straightened, his movements returning to normal human range. "I'll leave, but understand that your rules don't protect you from us. They protect us from each other. Think about why you're required to turn away names from the ledger. Think about what might happen if one of us stayed." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "The knocking you hear? Those are the ones who tried to stay without permission. They're trapped between, neither here nor gone. Your documentation doesn't help them, it merely records their suffering." Then he was gone, walking to his car and driving away into the desert darkness. Sophia and I stood in shocked silence for several moments. "What was that?" she finally whispered. "I don't know," I admitted, my hands shaking. "That's never happened before. Should we call Thomas?" I checked the time. 11:53 p.m. Yes, this is significant enough to warrant waking him. Thomas answered on the third ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. I explained the encounter, including Marcus Bellamy's statements about agreements and negotiations. Thomas was quiet for a long time after I finished. "He spoke to you directly? Acknowledged the ledger?" "Yes, said his name appearing was part of some deal made by the original owner. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't engage with anyone else who arrives until I'm present." He hung up before I could respond. Sophia paced the office, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "Is what he said true?" Are we not actually protecting ourselves? I don't know what's true anymore, I said honestly, but I know the rules have kept us alive. Whatever the reason behind them, they work. Thomas arrived in 8 minutes, his truck pulling up fast enough to spray gravel. He entered the office with an urgency I'd never seen from him. Tell me everything again, every word he said. I recounted the conversation as precisely as possible. Thomas's expression grew darker with each detail. This is concerning, he said finally. They've never directly communicated before, never acknowledged the system. So, what does it mean? It means something has changed. Thomas pulled out his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be very old photographs. The original owner, James Whitmore, did have arrangements. I inherited documentation about them when I took over, but much of it was coded or unclear. What kind of arrangements? Sophia asked. I'm not entirely certain, but there are references to permitted passages and designated refusals. The ledger system was already in place when I started. I simply maintained it because it worked. He showed us a faded photo of a stern-looking man standing in front of a newly constructed Desert Rose Motel. James Whitmore, 1952. He ran this place until 1985, then handed it to my predecessor who ran it until 1995 when I took over. Did they ever mention why certain names appear? I asked. Only that some things need to pass through, and others need to be prevented. The ledger distinguishes between them. But pass through to where? Sophia pressed. And from where? Thomas closed his eyes briefly. There are places in the world where the boundaries between states of being are thinner. Convergence points. This stretch of Route 66 has always been one of them. Long before the motel existed, long before the road itself, indigenous peoples knew this area was special. Special how? They avoided it, called it a place of crossing where spirits walked between worlds. James Whitmore either didn't know or didn't care. He built here because the land was cheap, and discovered too late what he'd built on, I finished. Thomas nodded grimly. By the time he understood, the motel was already integrated into whatever exists here. He couldn't close it, couldn't abandon it. So he negotiated rules, ways to coexist with what passes through. The rules keep us safe, but they also serve them? Sophia looked ill. Nothing is simple, Thomas said. The rules serve multiple purposes. They keep you safe, yes, but they also maintain order. Prevent chaos. If we didn't turn away the names from the ledger, if we let them all stay, the boundaries would collapse entirely. What would that mean? I don't fully know, but I suspect it would be catastrophic for far more than just this motel. We all stood in silence, processing these revelations. So, what do we do? I finally asked. Exactly what you've been doing. Follow the rules, document everything, trust the system that's kept this place functioning for 7 decades. Thomas looked at both of us seriously. Marcus Bellamy speaking to you changes nothing about procedure. If anything, it confirms that the rules matter more than we realized. After Thomas left, Sophia and I tried to return to our routine, but the conversation with Marcus had shaken something loose, revealed the scaffolding behind the facade. Do you think about quitting? Sophia asked around 3 a.m. Often, I admitted. But then I think about what might happen if someone less careful took over. Someone who didn't follow the rules strictly. The chaos Thomas mentioned. Potentially. Or maybe nothing would happen. Maybe the next person would be fine and I'm overestimating my importance. I shrugged. But I'm not willing to test that theory. Because of your family? Partly. Also because this matters. Keeping order here matters. Even if I don't fully understand why. We completed our luggage check at 3:15 a.m. All clear tonight. The knocking started at 4:23 a.m., room 18, but it was brief. Only 3 knocks before stopping entirely. That's unusual, I noted. Usually once it starts, it continues for at least 20 minutes. Maybe Marcus's visit disrupted something, Sophia suggested. Maybe. The rest of the shift passed uneventfully. When Thomas arrived for the day shift, he looked tired, as if he'd spent the remaining night hours researching rather than sleeping. I've reviewed all the historical documentation I have access to, he said. There are references to periodic communications from the entities that pass through. Not common, but not unprecedented either. What triggers them? I asked. Unclear, but they tend to happen when someone new enters the system, when the status quo shifts. Sophia paled. You mean because I'm new? Possibly. They may be testing you, seeing if you understand the rules as well as the veterans. That's terrifying. It is, Thomas agreed. But you handled it correctly. You followed protocol despite being confronted directly. That's exactly what I need from employees here. In the parking lot, Sophia looked drained. I don't know how much more of this I can handle. It gets easier, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. Your body adjusts to the fear. You learn to compartmentalize. That's not encouraging. We drove to our respective homes as the sun climbed higher, washing away the darkness that had made the night's events possible. I picked up Emma and Jacob from Mrs. Patel's, grateful for their sleepy chatter that reminded me of normalcy. 2 more weeks passed with Sophia working beside me. She'd stopped questioning the rules entirely, following them with the same religious devotion I'd developed over 3 years. We'd encountered more mystery names in the ledger, turned them all away. We'd documented knocking from empty rooms, tagged suspicious luggage, and once, memorably, dealt with a guest whose reflection showed them standing upside down on the ceiling while they stood normally before us. That guest had been politely but firmly redirected to other accommodations. On Sophia's 28th night, Thomas pulled me aside during the evening handover. His expression was more serious than usual. I need to talk to you about something, he said, gesturing toward his office. I followed him in, my stomach tightening with worry. Thomas's office was cluttered with filing cabinets and binders, decades of documentation about the Desert Rose's unusual history. You've been here longer than anyone else in the past 15 years, Thomas began, settling into his chair. 3 years, no incidents, perfect rule compliance. Is there a problem? No, quite the opposite. He pulled out a leather-bound ledger from his desk drawer. Not the one we used at the front desk, but something older. I'm getting too old for this, and my health isn't what it used to be. I need to start thinking about succession. I wasn't sure where this was going. The Desert Rose requires continuity, Thomas continued. Someone who understands what we're doing here, why it matters. Someone who can train future employees and maintain the protocols. You're asking me to take over as manager? Eventually, not immediately. I'm not ready to retire yet. But I want to start training you on the aspects of this job that go beyond overnight desk work. He opened the old ledger, showing me pages filled with that mechanical script. Dates going back to the 1950s, names that had appeared throughout the motel's history. The founder, James Whitmore, documented everything, Thomas explained. His observations, theories, attempts to understand what we're dealing with. This ledger contains patterns he identified over 30 years of operation. I leaned closer, examining the meticulous entries. Some names appeared once, others repeated across years or decades. Beside certain names were annotations. departed peacefully, disappeared upon checkout, never arrived despite entry. What are they? I finally asked the question I'd never dared voice. The things that appear in the ledger? Thomas was quiet for a moment. I'm not entirely certain. James's theory was that this location sits on what he called a passage point, a thin spot where different states of existence overlap. The motel was accidentally built directly on it. States of existence? Reality, unreality, the space between. James wasn't a scientist or philosopher. He was a businessman who stumbled onto something he couldn't fully understand. But he learned to navigate it through trial and error. The rules. Exactly. The rules are basically maps through dangerous territory. Follow them, and you maintain the balance. Break them, and you risk tears in the boundary. I thought about Marcus Bellamy, about his claims that the rules weren't protection but negotiation. Are we letting them through, the things that appear? We're preventing them from staying, Thomas corrected. There's a difference. Some things pass through this point naturally. It's part of how reality functions. Our job is to ensure they don't anchor here, don't establish permanent presence. And if they did anchor? Thomas's expression darkened. There've been incidents, years when the rules weren't followed carefully. 1967 saw a complete management failure. The ledger was ignored for 3 months. 7 guests disappeared. The local police investigated, found nothing, and the case went cold. He flipped to a section of the ledger marked with red ink. 1982, a manager tried to document everything scientifically, set up cameras, recording equipment, tried to capture evidence of what was happening. He had a breakdown after 6 weeks and was institutionalized. The facility he was in burnt down 3 months later. No survivors. Jesus. The Desert Rose demands respect, Thomas said. Not understanding, not explanation, just adherence to the protocols that keep it functioning. I looked at the decades of documentation, thinking about the weight of responsibility he was offering me. Why me? Sophia's picking things up quickly. Sophia's competent, but she doesn't have what you have. Thomas met my eyes directly. You stay because you have to, for your family. That desperation, that absolute need to keep this job, it makes you reliable in ways idealistic employees never are. I need someone who won't walk away when things get difficult. The truth of it stung, but I couldn't argue. I'd absorbed indignities and terror for 3 years because the alternative was losing my family's lifeline. I'll think about it, I said quietly. Take your time, but understand that if you accept, the job changes. More responsibility, more exposure to what we're dealing with, but also significantly better compensation. Back at the front desk, Sophia was processing a phone reservation. She looked up as I emerged from Thomas's office, curiosity in her expression. Everything okay? Yeah, just long-term planning stuff. We settled into our shift. Midnight came and went without incident. At 3 a.m., we did our luggage check, all clear. The knocking started at 4:17 a.m., but it was brief and desultory, more ritual than threat. As dawn approached, Sophia made fresh coffee while I balanced the night's receipts. The routine had become comfortable, familiar. Despite the strangeness we dealt with, there was satisfaction in maintaining order against forces that sought disruption. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said, handing me a coffee cup. "Sure. Do you ever think about leaving? Finding a normal job somewhere else?" I considered the question honestly. Sometimes, usually after particularly bad nights. But then I think about my father's medical bills being paid, about my mother being comfortable in her facility, about my sister finishing college debt-free. And I remember why I stay. It's not just about the money, though, is it? She was perceptive. No. It's also knowing that if I left, someone less careful might take over. Someone who'd break rules out of skepticism or carelessness, and people would get hurt. Sophia nodded slowly. I feel that too now. Like we're guards, protecting something important even if we don't fully understand it. That's exactly what we are. Thomas arrived at 7 a.m. as we were gathering our things. He looked tired but gave us both a warm smile. Quiet night? He asked. Relatively, I confirmed, handing over the documentation. One mystery name appeared around 2:30 a.m. Patricia Vance showed up at 3:45 a.m. We turned her away per protocol. Minor knocking in room 9, documented and resolved. Good work, both of you. In the parking lot, the morning sun was already heating the asphalt. Sophia paused by her car, shielding her eyes against the glare. Same time tonight? Same time, I confirmed. I drove home, thinking about Thomas's offer. Management meant more money, which could accelerate paying off my father's medical debts. It meant job security and control over who got hired for future positions. But it also meant deeper entanglement with whatever forces operated through the Desert Rose. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Mom had a good day yesterday, remembered all our names and wanted to see photos from my graduation. Small victories. Small victories indeed. I parked in front of my apartment and sat for a moment, watching normal people go about normal morning routines. Walking dogs, heading to conventional jobs, living lives uncomplicated by mysterious ledgers and entities that blurred in reflections. I envied them and pitied them in equal measure. They were protected by people like me, guards standing between their mundane reality and the things that pressed against its boundaries. They'd never know how thin those boundaries really were, how much effort went into maintaining them. My phone rang. Thomas. Yes? Wanted to catch you before you slept. I'm moving forward with your training regardless of whether you accept the management position. You need to understand more about what we're protecting. When do we start? Tonight after your shift. Bring Sophia if you're comfortable with that. She should understand too. He hung up before I could respond. I trudged up to my apartment, exhaustion settling into my bones. But sleep came easier now than it had in my early days at the Desert Rose. I'd learned to separate work from rest, to compartmentalize the strange from the normal. My dreams were peaceful, filled with mundane concerns and familiar faces. The things that knocked in empty rooms couldn't reach me here. Evening came too quickly. I arrived at the motel to find Sophia already there, looking nervous. Thomas called me, she said. Said we're doing some kind of extended training tonight. Apparently, he didn't give me details. We handled the evening check-ins, all legitimate guests with matching IDs and clear reflections. At 10 p.m., Thomas emerged from his office with a large cardboard box. Come with me, he said simply. He led us to room 30, one of the rooms that had been tagged multiple times for suspicious luggage. Thomas unlocked it, revealing a space that looked completely normal. 2 queen beds, generic artwork, standard motel amenities. Notice anything unusual? He asked. Sophia and I both scanned the room carefully. Nothing stood out immediately. Thomas walked to the far wall and pressed against a section that looked identical to the rest. With a soft click, a panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway. What the hell? Sophia breathed. James Whitmore was paranoid and thorough, Thomas explained. He built observation points throughout the motel, hidden spaces where he could monitor what happened in certain rooms without being detected. He produced flashlights from his box and handed them to us. Follow me, stay close and don't touch anything you don't understand." The passage was barely wide enough for single-file movement, with rough concrete walls and a low ceiling. We moved through darkness punctuated by our flashlight beams, descending what felt like a slight incline. After maybe 50 feet, the passage opened into a larger space, a room perhaps 15 feet square, with walls covered in symbols similar to those I'd seen in the ledger. Charts and diagrams papered one wall, showing what appeared to be maps of the motel with certain rooms marked in red. "This is James Whitmore's research chamber," Thomas said, his voice echoing slightly. "Everything he learned about the passage point is documented here." I moved closer to the wall of papers. One diagram showed the motel layout with lines radiating from a central point, the office where the ledger was kept. The lines extended outward like a web, connecting to specific rooms. The motel wasn't randomly designed, Thomas explained. James built it intentionally around the passage point, using architecture and placement to channel and control what moved through. "Control how?" Sophia asked. "The horseshoe shape isn't aesthetic, it's functional. It creates a bounded space that entities must pass through sequentially. The office sits at the narrow end, the bottleneck where everything must be filtered." He pointed to the diagram. Rooms 7, 14, 23, and 30 are positioned at cardinal points. They act as anchors, I suppose, stabilizing forces that keep the structure functioning. That's why those rooms always show suspicious activity, I realized. They're part of the system. Exactly. When luggage appears in those rooms, when knocking occurs, it's the passage point attempting to establish presence. Our job is to prevent that establishment through the protocols. Sophia traced one of the red lines with her finger. What happens if too many rooms become compromised, if we can't keep them clear? Thomas's expression was grim. Then the boundary collapses inward. The passage point would expand beyond the motel's confines, potentially affecting the surrounding area for miles. Has that ever happened? Once, 1973, before my time. The manager had a heart attack, leaving the motel unmanned for nearly 48 hours. By the time authorities arrived, the entire structure was... He paused, searching for words. Wrong. Rooms connected that shouldn't have been adjacent. Hallways led to impossible spaces. They had to demolish and rebuild significant portions. He pulled a faded photograph from the box, an image of the motel from that era. Even in the grainy black and white, something looked distorted about the geometry, angles that shouldn't have been possible given the horseshoe design. James had detailed procedures for reconstruction, Thomas continued. His documentation was comprehensive enough that they could rebuild according to his specifications. The passage point was recontained and operations resumed. "Why don't we just tear it all down?" Sophia asked. "Eliminate the problem entirely?" "Because the passage point existed before the motel," Thomas said. "It would still be here, just uncontrolled. At least this way, we can monitor and manage what comes through. Leave it unbound, and there's no telling what might manifest." We spent the next 3 hours in that hidden chamber as Thomas walked us through James Whitmore's research. Charts showing patterns in the mystery names. Certain ones appeared cyclically, every 7 years or every full moon. Diagrams explaining optimal room configurations for maximum stability. Detailed instructions for emergency protocols if the boundary showed signs of weakening. By the time we emerged back into room 30, my head was spinning with information. "This is just the foundation," Thomas said as we walked back to the office. "There are other elements. The role of the handwritten ledger versus the computer system. Why certain times of year see increased activity. What to do if a guest checks in legitimately but then becomes compromised during their stay." How long did it take you to learn all this? I asked. Years. And I'm still discovering new information in James's documentation. The man was obsessive but brilliant. Back at the desk, Sophia looked shell-shocked. This is so much bigger than following rules to avoid creepy encounters. Yes, Thomas agreed. You're maintaining a critical infrastructure that protects far more than just the motel guests, understanding that weight is important if you're going to continue working here. He looked at both of us seriously. I won't blame either of you for walking away after tonight. This is well beyond what you signed up for. But if you stay, you need to commit fully to understanding and maintaining the system. Sophia and I exchanged glances. I could see my own conflict mirrored in her expression. The desire to flee from such enormous responsibility balanced against the need to protect something important. I'm staying, I said finally, but I want to learn everything. No more surprises about hidden chambers or demolished wings. Thomas nodded. Agreed. Complete transparency from here forward. I'm staying too, Sophia added, her voice quiet but firm. Someone has to do this. Might as well be people who actually understand what's at stake. The rest of our shift passed in contemplative silence. We'd crossed a threshold tonight, moving from employees who followed rules to guardians who understood why those rules existed. The responsibility felt heavier, but also more purposeful. At 7 a.m., as Thomas arrived for the day shift, a car pulled into the parking lot. A young woman emerged, maybe early 20s, looking around with the nervous energy of someone starting a new job. That's your new trainee, Thomas told me. Rachel Chen, smart kid, hard worker, needs the money to pay off student loans. I watched Rachel approach the office, remembering my own first day 3 years ago. The skepticism, the fear, the slow realization that everything I thought I understood about reality was incomplete. I'll handle the initial training, I told Thomas. Introduce her to the basic rules, get her comfortable with procedures. Take it slow, Thomas advised. She doesn't need to know everything immediately. Let her adjust to the surface strangeness before revealing the deeper complexities. Rachel entered the office with an eager smile. Hi, I'm Rachel Chen, here for orientation. I stepped forward, putting on my professional expression. Welcome to the Desert Rose. I'm Sam, and I'll be training you. Before we get started, there are some special protocols you'll need to learn. Sophia caught my eye, a small knowing smile on her face. The cycle continued. Experienced guards training newcomers, passing down the knowledge that kept the passage point contained. As I began explaining Rule 1 to Rachel, I thought about the hidden chamber beneath Room 30, about James Whitmore's obsessive documentation, about the weight of protection we'd inherited. This was my life now. Not just a job to pay bills, but a calling to maintain boundaries that most people never knew existed. It was terrifying and exhausting and completely necessary, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And that's how it ended, or so we assume for now, as those warehouse shadows linger. If this tale kept you on edge, like and share it with a friend who dares to listen, then subscribe for more eerie nights like this one. Thanks for unwinding with me. Sleep tight if you can. And remember, follow the rules. Always.